Welcome to podcast number 2 with Lance, the famous Lance Martin, and Mike Jesse. Lance of Coldwell Banker, owner-broker, and I had a RE/MAX owner-broker. And to kind of review from what we talked about last time, I started noticing that there was a big surprise in the industry. People thought that this happened so quickly, and it really didn't. It started back in 2009 after the big debacle and with the housing market, and as things started to emerge, some of the large legacy franchises like RE/MAX and Coldwell Banker and all of them, they weren't doing anything wrong. It's just that they were not able to pivot. They were slow to get technology going. They needed to get agents going, needed to expand the offices. RE/MAX took a big infusion from another company so they could do an IPO to pay off debt, to expand their brick and mortar. That was their strategy in this. Whether that's right or wrong, time will tell, but we see the trend probably not be in the right direction. Coldwell Banker kind of wanted to do the same thing with implementing new technologies and doing some other things. Again, time will tell, but it seems like at that point in time, EXP and some of the other cloud-based, EXP is at the top of the tier. They're tier 1. Then you have Real and you have some others. But they didn't have all the challenges of trying to pivot, trying to overlay technology, trying to implement all the systems together. Right. It's just been tough for them.
Yeah. It's so funny as we were discussing by the way, we made it to our second episode, so I'm very proud of us.
Yeah. And we threw out the name the group name that we have.
Yeah, I don't know if we still have a name though.
Well, the requests that I got so far were just inappropriate to have that as a name.
Well, I've landed on one. I threw this out there and you didn't really respond to it very well, but I think it was Claude or one of the AI models. I said, give me some suggestions. And the one that I came back to, I don't know, maybe we need to be a little less cute, but it was no franchise required.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe that's a little too specific.
It's more of a tagline.
Yeah, exactly. So at any rate, to jump into the topic, so we said, well, let's do a deeper dive. We kind of laid a little bit of foundation, and we're going to kind of figure out which direction our topics and our podcasts go. But I think I said this in our last podcast. If I didn't say it there, I've said it before, and it's a Gary Keller quote. And his quote basically says something to the effect that we were losing so slowly we thought we were winning.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really relate to that. And I don't, it's kind of cute, and coming from Gary Keller, it's like, legend in our industry. But to me, it resonates to me. I mean, those are words that I could say as a franchise owner and a broker owner. We were slowly the frog in the pot. We were slowly, losing. But hey, it wasn't that bad, honey. Next year will be better, and then another year and another year. But you kind of convince yourself that your business model is winning. But then also implies the other cute little saying is you go broke slowly, and then all of a sudden, or you're on your way to bankruptcy. It's very, very slow, and then all of a sudden, the next thing oh my God, I'm broke. To bring that to the to kind of at least my experience, which I know they're so similar, the experience and the journey from 23 years of Coldwell Banker, and again, I always find myself saying I have nothing bad to say about Coldwell Banker. I really don't, because my criticism is nothing to do with Coldwell Banker. It has just to do with our industry and our business model. But it goes back years ago. We had talked previously, like going back to kind of the market shift in 2009. And in Coldwell Banker's case, which wasn't really Coldwell Banker back then, I don't know if they
Theology or?
Well, I don't know if I was going to say Sendent. I don't know if they were Sendent then or Realty, and then from Realty to Anywhere, and then, of course, Anywhere to the acquisition. But they were carrying, I might have it wrong, but it was something in the neighborhood of $5 billion in debt. And I think that was coming out of, they were owned for a portion of time, I believe, by Apollo Capital. And then they went public and all the rest of that. But it's a lot of debt to carry. Just think about that. And then the brick and mortar. And when you look at that in hindsight and you sit back and say, okay, well, that's kind of where they started from. And the amount of fees and overhead associated with carrying that type of organization is huge. And then over time, what happens is like, well, commission compression, agents demanding, requiring, and getting higher splits, more compression and pressure on franchise holders. And again, at some point in time, I mean, even if I would be careful when I say this, but you sit back and say, when I first came onto the brand, it was my understanding anyway, the franchise fee was X. This is what it was. You were paying that. It was non-negotiable. And then over my 23 years, I'd hear them say, oh, geez, well, you're not paying X. You're paying something less than X. So that, to me, was almost the realization that the franchisers felt the same pressure that we felt, where they had to kind of loosen thing up, and the splits went from X to Y to whatever it happened to be. But yeah, it's been a heck of a process though, whether it's CB or Remax or any of them, to be honest. So, at any rate, where's we kind of know where we've been. So where are we going? Or not that we have to go forward. We can still look backwards a little bit. But what's the industry going to do, Mike? What's happening?
It seems like to me, from what I've been able to determine, is they were making that slow migration to something more virtual, because Remax knew when they issued their IPO and had a big influx of cash, they were trying to expand their brick and mortar,
Right.
but they were losing agents. And over the last 10 years, when that first started, they've lost about 30%. Coldwell Banker's lost a little bit less than 30%. Century 20, they were all losing about that amount.
Yep.
And coincidentally enough, the brokerages in the cloud and EXP were growing at about that rate. In fact, EXP became tier one only because they had made some huge jumps greater than that. Right. And I think everybody's trying to pivot to that. It's like when it was 8-track tapes and then it went to cassette. Took a while and people really resisted. Now you never heard of that.
Right.
I think it's the same kind of a thing. If there's going to be a transition to full in the cloud, because real estate's expensive,
Yep.
office staff, I mean, just better than I do because you had more offices than I did, but to try to carry office costs and utilities and insurance and all that stuff, it didn't make sense. And all that money could go, like with the cloud brokerages, all that money goes to training and education and the things that we're doing here today.
Right.
And I think that's the logical choice. And so Remax is trying to do that, I think, in my opinion. Real coming in and trying to make that transition to them. Their challenge is they're going to keep the franchise agreements, I think, because they want to keep their agent base because they've already lost 30%.
Right.
And I think Compass is kind of doing the same thing with trying to keep them together if they can, migrate them if they can, but it's just going to cause a stalemate or a stalling of that migration where the other tier cloud type brokerages don't have any encumbrances.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, there's so many things listening to you talk. So let me try to tie this together. We subscribe to Inman News. I mean, how many emails a day do we get from Inman with real estate articles? I mean, more than one. I think last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a headline, and I read the article. I don't read all of them, of course, but there was something to the effect, and it was a little bit of a critique, I think, of agents. And I generally don't critique agents, not just because, they're kind of my partners and we're shoulder to shoulder, but the critique was something like to the effect that, agents want certain things. They want culture, and they want to work at an office that, hey, we go to the Angel game periodically, or we got the bowling league, or we have the happy hour, or we do training, and we do all these wonderful things, which we do. We do that at our office. I don't know that we do it as good or better than anybody else, but we've done it for decades. And I'm sure you participated in that back at Remax and all the rest of that. But then the gist of the article is, well, that's what they want, but do they all actually participate and support that? So that would always be the painful thing with me is we do a company event, and then I look at the participation, and I'd be like, well, geez, we have 15% or 20% of our agent pool that's actually participated in supporting the event. Oh, and by the way, and the other of the 80% that didn't come, some of those people were like they would scream the loudest that they wanted these things. But putting that aside, so that made me think of like the office space. So back in our peak growth phase within CB, which was interesting because we were growing when the market was tough. But I think this was probably around 2010, 9 or 10, which is interesting, right around the time we started talking. I opened an office in Costa Mesa. It actually wasn't Costa Mesa. It was Santa Ana. But we didn't want to say it was in Santa Ana, and we couldn't afford Costa Mesa, so we were South Coast Metro, which is the equivalent of, I guess that's what you call that part of Santa Ana. Beautiful office. But anyway, but it was small. It was less than 1,000 square feet. And I wanted it to be a drop-in office, planted a flag, got my Coldwell Banker franchise approved. And by the way, at that point in time, there was a lot of offices trying to do that, whether they called them a signing office or whether they called it just a drop-in or whatever it happened to be. But these were small offices, so you could afford the office space. So you couldn't have private offices. You couldn't have private desks. But it worked as a broker. I said, I can do this. But then what you've quickly discovered is that, the agents wanted more. So if you did have an agent that was in that office, well, where's my private office? I'm like, well, I can't afford the private office.
Yeah. Remax did the same thing with the franchise agreements. You couldn't have a remote office within the geographical region that said Remax on it, but they let you have an office with your team name, which I thought was a good idea because we talked about it last time. In reality, it's not the franchise; it's the relationship you have with your client,
Correct,
and the name of your team. Yep. That kind of it's really the team that is the brand, and not so much.
So back up on that. So I'm curious about that. Okay, so you had Remax regular brick and mortar traditional offices. This is my office, but you maybe wanted to open a satellite office or whatever you wanted to call it. So what were the rules associated with that?
Initially, when we signed, it was 5 miles.
Okay.
Had to be 5 miles apart. And then
from any other Remax.
Of any other Remax. Okay. And as the debacle unfolded and the market started to reemerge around 2010 or so, they were trying to plant more brick and mortars. That was their goal. They weren't doing it like some of the others were doing it. They thought more brick and mortars would be the answer, I think. And so they brought that down to a mile. Okay. Well, that caused a lot of dissension. And that folded into what you just said. That was something really unique that you said. Is you'd have all these events. So we were doing car shows. Our office was in Dana Point, one of them. Right. So we were doing car shows and events like that. And it was good to get people together, but we had the same problem. People were not necessarily participating. And what I found.
But you had to do it though.
But you had to do it.
Yeah,
but what I found was the agents loved that camaraderie and collaboration as long as they got leads through the office.
Sure.
When the leads weren't coming in, they didn't really come to the events anymore. But as long as they were getting leads, they were participating. And I thought it was just an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. You sound like my son, both of my sons. So isn't it all really about the leads?
In a sense, yeah.
Everything else is secondary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they want that culture. And I think I had mentioned it or alluded to it. Remax they didn't do collaboration as well, I don't think. EXP is, I think, perfect in that. Agents at any level will talk to anybody and give them their experiences. Right. Remax only did that at a high level. 500,000 gross commissions or above, you went to a thing called the Elite Retreat, which was a great, and probably still is if they're doing it, a great environment where people shared. There was no fear of competition, collaboration, and ideas. But it never really drifted down to the office. You brought it back to your office because you'd win if you went.
Right.
You would do it if you went. But it just wasn't enough because they were still structured in the brick and mortar. You have the doors open, you have somebody doing desk time, and you're waiting for clients to walk in like the Maytag repair guy.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
It just doesn't. Well, but it is interesting getting in the brick and mortar. I mean, just to take that look in the rearview mirror. At one point I had 2 offices that were over 6,000 square feet. Which again, very traditional office. You can go back, 25 years. Your average, insert any company, whether it was, Century 21 or Remax or Coldwell Banker, the average office. I mean, a 6,000 square feet office might have even been on the small side, But 6,000 square foot office, you could have a bullpen of 30, 40 agents in it, 8 or 10 private offices, full blown receptionists. But it was such a different market back then, We actually used to get sign calls. We actually used to get people on a Saturday afternoon that would walk into the office, walk-ins, right? I mean, what happened to those, Mike? I mean, honest to God, I don't want to say I can't remember the last time someone walked into the office because we do a lot of activities in our office. But genuinely, the last time like a buyer walked into our office on a weekend or any day and said, hey, is there anybody available to show me this house? We don't live in that world anymore.
No,
right?
and a lot of it was cultural, I think. That's the way the old school worked. And when we had the office in Dana Point, it was in a prime location. And we do car shows and we do all kinds of things. And we had a few people walk in and do that. Not very often, but as the culture changed and the agents got younger, it was more social. Right. It was more meeting at the coffee shop. You run into someone at a sporting event and you develop a personal relationship, which was really the way to do it. And that's where the trend was going.
Yeah. Well, but don't you think that's where it is now, especially with the younger agent? It's all social.
Absolutely. I mean,
it's truly they'll join the bowling league and let's do the happy hour or, do a Bible study or whatever it happens to be.
We had the agents want a nicer environment, a nicer office like you talked about. And so I came from a construction background, so I built brand new from just concrete floor up, really nice office in Dana Point. Hardly anybody showed up because they're working from home and they're meeting people at Starbucks.
But that's the hard part.
Which is fine. I mean, because that was the trend. I just wasn't seeing it at the time.
Well, it's fine for them. It's not fine for you. Right. Well, but that's how we get our violin out and we together, we could just talk about all of our woes.
And back in the day, not too long ago, RE/MAX required the brick and mortar to be a certain square footage. You had to have a receptionist, had to have some things. They wanted you to use their accounting system. There was a lot of things that they required in the franchise agreement. They loosened that up because they saw things just weren't running right, and they were losing agents. They had a hole in the dam, over that time of period.
This is interesting, and I've been meaning to talk to Kyle and Dan and Leo and others about this because I still have a brick and mortar mindset, And as I'm now on month 3, this is, I think we're month 3. It was whatever that was, March 10th, I think, of this year, 2026, officially leaving CB, jumping on board with EXP, and I've had a lot of people, even within the EXP, and actually not even just within the EXP world, just people in general that are like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And a good percentage of them, even especially the Coldwell Banker broker owners and others, not just Coldwell Bankers, I talk to everybody, like, "Oh, well, did you keep your offices?" And I'm like, it's an interesting question because I get that a lot. I think the assumption was that I'm just walking away from my brick and mortar and I'm going to kind of go into this completely cloud-based brokerage. And I'm like, no, I 100% still have my offices, and I have no intention of abandoning my brick and mortar, which again, I do kind of get that, well, wait, isn't that like the whole reason that you kind of went to EXP? I said, well, no, because I do want to grow. But maybe I'm wrong, but I want to keep my brick and mortar because agents still want that. This is the deal. If I was an agent today, just a regular agent being me, I would be one of those agents that never comes into the office. I generally would never come into the office. I'd come in to cash a check, meet a client, maybe do a meeting here and there, but I wouldn't want or need a private office or a desk. It just says, but I realize I'm unique. I'm not. There's agents that need that.
Yeah, we found the same way. The agents that wanted to come into the office, not saying this in a negative way, but they were less producers. And they came into the office, they had an environment to sit and collaborate within the office. Yep. The agents that were performing were out meeting people, talking to folks, going places.
Taking names.
Because it's all about, personal relationships and getting to know someone. And they're the ones that were the most successful. Right. So, that was the younger agent, the ones that were a little bit younger. And so we started seeing the writing on the handwriting on the wall.
Right.
And then we, in addition to that, the technology and some of the things that RE/MAX had was just not evolving for us. Again, they weren't being a bad company, but their direction of increasing their brick and mortar at the time, it just wasn't the direction that we saw because the technology and the other systems weren't evolving. And so we started looking around, and we looked at all of them. We looked at everybody. And we had been with other brokerages. We were at Coldwell Banker for a while in the early days. Keller Williams, my wife, went to in Arizona. We were licensed in Arizona for a while, just to kind of figure it out before we landed on RE/MAX. And then we did the same process again with what we did now, and it took a couple of years. But EXP by far was, the best we thought. And the things that add to it is if you're going to go buy an automobile, you want to buy the best one. Right. Well, EXP is still considered and rated as the tier 1.
Yeah.
It cloud brokerage.
Again, it's very self-serving now. Here we are. What are we going to sit here and talk trash? And by the way, most people that know me, if I had oh my God, I had a realization and it wasn't great, I'd share it. Wow, I was disappointed with my transition. I haven't had that yet. But this is the part that I haven't, and I've talked to this internally, but I guess I'm going to share part of my business plan with the world and with you to the degree that you and I have talked about that. So we currently have 3 brick and mortar traditional legacy offices, if you will. We have downsized all of them except for my Claremont office over the last decade. From 6,000 square feet to 1,200 square feet, from 6,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet, et cetera, et cetera. And then, frankly, collapsed a couple of them. I had an office in Redlands, 2 offices in Redlands, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, I'm not doing this. So if any of my current agents today are like, what did Lance just say? But I could close or shrink my existing office footprint and go from 3 offices to 10 offices in the next 30 days, or not 30 days, probably take 6 months to do it, and not increase my overhead by just basically having small satellite offices. So instead of having, I have a 3,600 square foot office in Moreno Valley. Okay, well, maybe that's a 1,200 square foot office, and then I go get a 600 square foot office in Palm Desert and a 600 square foot office in Newport Beach and an 800 square foot office in Long Beach or whatever it happens to be. Just literally just drop-ins where, hey, this is us. Here's our EXP Cobalt group, and expand that footprint. But again, I'm talking to a very specific agent who says, well, who's interested in that? Well, the agent who's mostly working out of their house. Long Beach is home for me. So if I'm one of those agents, by the way, I even thought about this. Let's just talk about it, during our show. So, and I don't know if this is a thing or not. If I'm just an EXP agent, I'm not really on a team. I just signed up. I've signed up straight with the mothership, and I don't really have that type of a relationship, and I'm working out of my house. I know we got that relationship with the Regis Suites and all the rest of that, but I'm like literally saying, okay, if I had an office in Long Beach, and it's mine, it's my EXP office, and I'm Cobalt, nonsense. If you're an EXP agent, frankly, if you're a Coldwell Banker agent, come on in, knock your socks off. Obviously you're not going to set up camp there and put pictures of your kids on the desk or anything like that. But if you want to come in, have a cup of coffee, use the copy machine, meet a client, why not? And just see if we can develop some relationships. So, I've really thought that through to the point where I've kind of geographically kind of mapped that out a little bit. And so I thought, well, what would this look like? Because I would still be supporting brick and mortar in a very traditional way, but in a very untraditional way, because these would literally just be places to drop in. The rent would be fairly inexpensive. No receptionist or anything like that. It would just, here's a key, knock your socks off. Have you considered that, or do you know anybody who's doing that?
We did.
Okay.
I don't know anybody that's doing that specifically. What we are doing is I took a step back and said, again, go back to the personal relationship.
Yep.
Most of our clients, there's some that want to come to the office, but most of the clients, they want that personal relationship. You have to develop that. So what we did is we joined a couple of, I was a board of governors at a private club in Costa Mesa.
Okay.
We're now at another private club in Newport Beach at the Pacific Club.
Yeah.
Not to give them a plug, but the Pacific Club. And very nicely done. I hate to use the word high class, but it's, very well done. And we'll meet clients there, and they like that.
Yeah.
And we'll meet even agents. If an agent wants to do something, we'll have a little event and have them come in.
Right.
But it's more comfortable. It's more acceptable for clients not come in and sit in a conference room in an office.
But that's specific to you and Kathy, though. Is that available to your team?
Yeah, we bring the agents in. We'll have get-togethers there.
Nice.
We'll do stuff, and they can bring a guest, which would be a client, and we encourage that. And we've had pretty good luck with that.
Yeah.
Now, is that going to be a long-run success? I don't know, but so far we haven't. The people that we've brought onto our team, Kathy's brought on 3 more agents. They're not interested in an office.
Yeah. But I also think the agents, certainly within the EXP world, no pun intended, but I think they understand that there is a trade-off. When you're not paying legacy franchise fees on every transaction forever, or whatever that they understand there's a little bit more money in the pot, but the exchange for that is I'm sure there's lots of EXP agents out there that do have brick and mortar, and their team lead has provided them with a private office. I'm sure those exist, but that's certainly not going to be our model. Moving
Nor
forward.
ours. Yeah. It has to be big enough to be able to fund that, because as we know, it just costs money to do it.
Well, it does, and that's what I've been doing for 30 years, and I've decided I don't want to do that anymore. That doesn't work.
And the other thing that I liked about EXP was in the old environment that we're in, the legacy environment, you kind of are organized geographically because people come into the office.
Yep.
But we now have agents with us in Texas.
Yeah.
Because we've got our broker's license in Texas, and we've got some people that have joined.
Yep.
Well, they're not going to fly out to a team meeting in California, and we're not going to.
Where in Texas are you? What city?
Well, we work kind of that little strain from Houston to College Station to Austin. And
Is that a little? That seems like a big.
it's about, if you from Houston, if you go to Houston, it's about an hour and a half to College Station.
Okay.
And we've got a home there. But the university is a great place for kids that get out of school and need
Right.
places to rent or buy, first-time home buyers. And then Austin's the outskirts of Austin.
And do you have some brick and mortar there? No. Well, it's okay. We stumbled into something. By the way, we've done no preparation for this. A couple emails back and forth, a couple little notes here and there.
Kind of on the fly.
So tomorrow, I have an agent that and her husband that are going to be onboarding with us, and I've had this. It's so funny because I look back over the last 10, 15 years, and I look at agents that I still have wonderful relationships with, but are no longer with what used to be, of course, Coldwell Banker Town and Country, only because they moved out of state, or only because they still did some business and was licensed in California, but primarily they were in Florida or Oklahoma or whatever. So it's either tomorrow or Thursday. I have an appointment, husband and wife. The wife has been affiliated with our company for decades, but her husband just got licensed, and they want to build a team and they want to move forward, but they're going to be 50-50. California, Southern California, Inland Empire, and this is the part I don't know geographically where in Texas. I'm going to find out on tomorrow or Thursday. And we had the whole conversation. And it was easy conversation to have because the husband in the relationship who just got licensed apparently has been doing a whole bunch of research. And what he realized is what you and I already know and about what I'm about ready to say. If you want to do business in multiple states and be licensed in multiple states, there's no better model than an EXP model. And the cool part was as this conversation was happening, the husband went to his wife and said, "Hey, this is what I want to do." And she said, "Well, geez, I'm already there basically." But again, keep in mind we just transitioned, so are we? I think in their mind, well, are we really going to be committed to Lance and EXP, or are we going to go in a different direction? Well, he realized that EXP was the place to do this multiple state licensing stuff.
It's easier. It's been seamless for us because we went Texas or California, Texas. Now we're in Florida.
Right.
And agents in Florida, if they have a question, we're pretty good about answering them. But some of the rules and procedures in Texas are a little bit different. Not all that different, but we hook them up with the broker that we make a relationship with out of Texas, and everybody's friendly and they collaborate. That's the one thing that I found, that no one's afraid to talk to anybody else. Whereas before there was a little bit of ownership turf areas,
right?
Turf issues with certain areas, but we haven't found that with EXP. It's been pretty good.
Well, another part of this, and I think I know enough of it to hopefully I don't embarrass myself, but that's why I asked if you have brick and mortar. Well, to the degree that they need some additional local support beyond just the brokerage team within EXP on Texas, well, this co-sponsorship thing, I'm like, well, this is going to be awesome, because I have a relationship. I'll co-sponsor them, maybe with you and Kathy, or if there's another EXP that does physically have some ability to maybe give them a little more support. So that's again, and that is, I talk about this a lot because Drew and Drake and myself, we have the opportunity over the next, I think, decade to do a tremendous amount of business out of California. We have clients that we've done business with for 15, 20 years that own hedge funds, and they own thousands of properties out of state. And I talk to them regularly because I'm a sales guy. And I visited probably 50% of these projects over the last 5 years in anticipation for, at one point in time, they're going to sell them. I want to be that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the ability to do that within an EXP world, it just excites me.
It's much easier. We found that it's just...
Yes. Yeah. And not that I couldn't do it in a traditional legacy brand, because I could, but much easier. And the ability to grow a team in a way that, I'm not going to be in these states forever, but I might be in them for 12 to 24 months.
Well, if you had a brick and mortar or the classic legacy style franchise to move into an area and it gets slow and you want to move back out or move someplace else, a little more difficult with EXP. You just, nothing changes, not even the phone number, You just tell them you're someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been fun though. Dan said that to me the other day, and I shared this conversation with one of my agents. And this again, I've only been 3 months, and I think I was 2 weeks in or 3 weeks in this studio, sitting right here. I mean, it might have even been the week before we impacted, but whatever. It's been within the last 3 or 4 months. And Dan kind of turned to me and says, "You're having fun, aren't you?" And I'm like,
Don't know yet.
well, no, but he must, and at that point in time, I mean, even today, I mean, Dan and I have become friendly and we've shared some cocktails. But we haven't really gotten to know each other yet, but we know each other well enough but he saw something in me, a little spark in my eye, that it must have felt different or new. And I'm like, you picked that up. You definitely picked it up. I'm enjoying this because I do love this business. But, it's been tough, right? I mean, heck, it's been a difficult market, and, not to get my violin out, but the broker ownership side for a very long time has been difficult. So anyway, I'm like, yeah, I am having fun. I'm excited about the opportunities. I'm excited about, and it gets not all puppy dogs and rainbows, but I'm excited about what could be, and it's nice. So that was on video. One of my agents, he wouldn't care if I shared his name, but I'll leave that out. He watched that video. And he talked to me 2 weeks ago. And he says, I was watching that thing when Dan told you or asked you if you were having fun. And I responded, yeah, I am. He says, I think I'm feeling that a little bit because I've been kind of a little bit stuck, which is easy as an agent. I mean, this is a difficult marketplace. And it's easy to feel, oh my God, I'm just kind of just plodding along and I'm grinding.
And especially now with all what's going on, I think there's a lot of people in flux about what's going to happen with,
Yeah, market. I mean, we're in a challenging marketplace, but I certainly can't speak for all my agents, and I'm sure there's agents that don't feel exactly the way I feel as far as the excitement and the opportunity. But there are several of them that are feeling that excitement and feeling that opportunity, and it's nice. And now we're closing some escrows too, and people are starting to see some numbers on their paycheck. And got a couple people that are potentially taking advantage of some rev share stuff, which is kind of cool. So. Yeah, it's good.
And the equity share. I mean, there's, you get the rev shares as the team grows, and you get the equity with stock, and it's a way to create some wealth and not just I call it wages. You go out and you sell a home, represent somebody, and the commission that you get, it's really your wages.
Right.
But to be able to create some revenue share by getting passive income from the people on your team or have equity in ownership without being an owner.
Yeah.
So you have all the benefits of a brokerage, but you don't have the brokerage issues.
That liability overhang. Yeah. It's funny because we've done very little, and this was by design, but I think we thought internally. When I say we, I'm always talking about myself and Drew and Drake, and that's a Martin group. But Paul, my sales manager, he's been our partner shoulder to shoulder for 20 years or almost. But we made a very conscious decision, in part internally, but we were also told that, hey, don't emphasize the rev share, don't emphasize the stock. As you're moving forward and you're doing this, just say, hey, this is a model. We think it's a good model, and let that kind of, that it'll come to that. So don't sit back and say, come with us because
of all these other
rev
things.
Share.
Yeah.
And I think that was a good decision because I don't know that we.
And that's probably a good point too. Let it grow organically.
Well, and that's kind of where we are. So here we are 3 months in. And now we're starting to see some of those things, which are cool. Agents are getting emails that say, "Hey, don't forget to sign up for your I think it's the Schwab account or whatever it happens to be." And they're coming to, "What is this?" I'm like, "Well, we haven't really talked about that very much." Like, "Well, tell me more." So, and some of them are like, "Oh, yeah, that's awesome." And others are like, "Well, I'd rather invest in in NVIDIA." I'm like, "Well, fine, go invest in NVIDIA. Do whatever you want."
And hopefully, I think we should do at some point in time as we continue these sessions to take a subject like that and talk about it.
Well, I think we need to, because I need to learn. I again, I'm embarrassed to say this, but whatever. So yesterday morning, what's today, Tuesday? Today's Tuesday. Yesterday morning, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., I actually went in. I should have done this 6 months ago. Certainly should have done it 3 months ago. I went in and I did the agent orientation. Okay. Which, I did. Because, I figured, because we're internally, I did an agent orientation. I'm like, well, I had better probably do the orientation myself because I'm sure I'm missing a few things. So I did it. I kind of went through the things that I thought were important and touched on a bunch of stuff. And then I'm like, okay, well, let me sit down. So yesterday morning I sat down, which, by the way, very good. I've been nothing but impressed with just the quality of the people and the training and again, fast forward's a whole nother deal, and I understand they've got their whole separate world going on, but really, really good stuff. But whether it's the rev share or the equity share, we need to do that. We need to do a session on that, and I'm sure you could teach me a thing or two.
I don't know about that, but it's certainly there's all these avenues to create wealth for yourself.
Yeah.
Not that that's the number one thing in life, because you want to be happy, you want to be in a good environment, things we just talked about. Agents, it's not always about money, but if you can be happy, be in the environment that you want and you're comfortable, you want to be able to provide for your family and to provide for wealth for your family. So it's important. Right. And EXP was just the best way to do that for us. Right. That mechanism wasn't there with RE/MAX and a lot of the other franchises. They just they're all old school and they're fighting it. So.
Yeah, that's a fact. Well, it's very interesting time. I will tell you, not to hopscotch, and we'll save this for a topic for episode 3 or 4 or 5. But all of this stuff that industry's been going through, and it kind of brings me back to Compass. So whenever I have nothing but respect for Robert Refkin at Compass, and I bring it up and I almost hesitate because it almost feels like whatever. If I say anything negative, it almost sounds like sour grapes because of Compass coming in. But man, you talk about upsetting the apple cart. And specifically with all this MLS stuff, I have got some gigantic concerns about what in the heck is going on in our industries with these
Compass
the MLS
has,
related.
$6 billion invested in all the stuff they have with debt. And the acquisition was $1.6 billion.
Yeah, it's like that.
You have to get more agents and more commissions and more revenue to pay for that.
Yeah.
And again, it trickles down to the agent. The biggest concern that I've been fed back from agents is, how's it going to affect my desk fee? Are my fees going up? Are the commissions being reduced?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm not in the in crowd with those folks, but how else do you?
Anybody knows.
How else do you run a business? How do you just overlay, especially in Compass's part, how do they overlay all those systems that they have?
Well, and again, this is to the degree that we're holding an audience here. What are we going to be talking about in episode 3, 12, 25, 117? Well, I think we're going to talk about all that sort of stuff. We've been gravitating on kind of how we got from A to B, and here we are. But there's just so much stuff going on out in our industry, whether it's MLS related or, well, again, the acquisition of the Anywhere brands. Well, best I can tell right now, it's business as usual. If I'm at C21, Better Homes and Gardens, CB, whatever it happens to be, you're just operating accordingly. I'm sure there's been a little bit of shifting around. But then I was talking to a friend of mine who's a RE/MAX guy, and we're having the conversation recently because, of course, the real acquisition. And I'm like, well, what's it looking like? What are you going to do? He's, I don't know. I'm just kind of waiting. But he had mentioned something which I thought was interesting. He says, well, the interesting part is it's a little bit different. If I was CB, and which of course I was, and Compass acquires us, and I'm an agent at CB that says, hey, I've been thinking about going to Compass anyway because they're an awesome brand. I think I want to go that way. Well, I don't know if the agent really understands. I said, well, you're leaving me, and you're going across the street, and even though the parent company is now that, you're leaving me. Okay, so I was having that exact same conversation with a broker owner of a RE/MAX that I've spoke to. He says, well, we've got to kind of figure that out because, what if I have an agent who wants to be a real agent? What does that mean? I said, well, I don't know. What does that mean? Does that mean what I just described? If a CB agent leaves to go to Compass, they're leaving that broker. So I would imagine that's probably the same right now within the real world, or are they going to make some sort of a deal that says,
nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
But if you go back to the way it used to work in the old days, if your agent came to you and said, I think I'm not going to be, I've been with Coldwell Banker for a while, and Lance, I really like you, but I'm going to go over to XYZ franchise. We're just going to make a move. It kind of hurts a little bit because you're losing someone. So even though it's within the same umbrella, they're going to lose. A Sotheby agent decides to move and go over to, some other franchise within the umbrella. Still kind of hurts a little bit.
Well, it hurts us. It doesn't hurt who's at the top of the umbrella.
Right. Right.
Well, we had a recruiting thing, and I'm sure it was within all of franchises, within Coldwell. And by the way, I always respected that. The vast majority of Coldwell Bankers, there was no blue on blue recruiting. So if you and I are competitors, but we're a market away. But we're close enough, or maybe one of your agents would want to come to me, or one of my agents would want to come to you. We generally had, gentlemen and gentle lady agreements that, hey, Mike, I'm not going to solicit your people. You don't solicit my people. Occasionally, you'd have a little bit of wandering.
Yeah, Remax called it poaching. No poaching.
Well, but again, in fairness, I mean, there was so little of that. It's not even worth mentioning within the Coldwell Banker world. I have to this day, I have wonderful relationships with all my Coldwell Banker brethren. But again, when that would happen, it would be painful. Or they went to Century 21 or whatever.
You should take it personally.
Well, yeah, of course you do. So it'd be interesting to see how that shakes out with these mergers and acquisitions, and now with and not that Fathom is all that large of a footprint, but Fathom is not a small company, and they just got acquired by what was it, Bed Bath and Beyond or whatever it happens to be, or something like that. So I'm like, what does that look like? What are we doing?
I don't know.
I mean, seriously, what are we doing here? And it is funny, and again, Better Homes and Gardens, which is now and has been for decades now, an Anywhere brand, but I remember when BH&G came in as a franchise, because at that time, I may have the dates wrong, but it was right around the time I think I impacted, because Better Homes and Gardens was always Better Homes and Gardens. They were the magazine and whatever they did, and all of a sudden they're slapping their name on a real estate company, and I remember I'm like, wow, okay, well how does that work? What does that look like? I mean, they're obviously leveraging in the same ways like a Sotheby's was leveraging that auction house and that brand. So it is interesting. And how many of those have we had over the years? Okay, GMAC, or right, GMAC, which is the motor company. So we had a GMAC Real Estate for a period of time. We had a Merrill Lynch Real Estate for a period of time. I'm sure you remember Great West.
Berkshire Hathaway did from years and years ago.
Well, that's why I wonder if Berkshire Hathaway really, kind of, not that they don't know what they're doing. I mean, Buffett and the gang's got to know what they're doing, but there's a lot of companies that are similar to Berkshire Hathaway that did that and then said, what am I doing in this real estate business? Let me get the hell out.
Yeah, and I think it's going to, my personal opinion is, and I think we talked about it a little bit, it's going to evolve a little bit to finally that may go away. Yeah. Only because the agent has the relationship with the client, and the agent should be the brand. The old system was the franchise brand.
Yep.
And I think that's just a system that we've evolved out of that, like going from one technology and audio visual to another. I think it's the same kind of thing. And to have these big companies, you see it happening, and it's becoming corporate centric rather than agent centric. I mean, football stadiums used to be owned by local venues and stuff, and now they're all corporate owned.
With logos, with $1 million annual contracts to slap their name on the roof for 5 years or whatever it happens to be. Yeah, it is so interesting. I mean, you're talking about the agent being the brand. The couple that I was just talking about, I was talking to them yesterday, scheduling an appointment. I'm going to do business in Texas and here. And again, I said these words, and I think Drake, my younger son, was walking away. He was kind of in the room when I was talking. He kind of walked away, and I would tell what I said in a minute. He kind of reacted viscerally, like, "Oh, Dad, stop saying that." But to set it up, so the agent who's coming with us said, "So what are we going to be? Are we part of the Cobalt Group, which is what we've kind of branded ourselves as, the Cobalt Group?" And I've been saying literally since the day we impacted, I do feel a little schizophrenic answering that question, because honestly, I don't care. You be whatever you want. Because me, Drew, and Drake, we've been the Martin Group for decades, but we never really branded it that way because we were owners of the Coldwell Banker. So we were the Martin Group, but we were very heavy on the Coldwell Banker side because we wanted to support our franchise and our brand when a lot of our agents didn't. So over the last several years, we've kind of branded this Cobalt thing. So hey, when we're going with EXP, we didn't really feel using, even though, Whistle Beer are using their names, obviously, we didn't really feel comfortable. We didn't really want to go that way. Do you want to, brand Martin? I'm a Martin, you're not a Martin, So we thought, well, let's go Cobalt. We'll see what happens. So we've been doing that, and a lot of agents are grabbing it. So anyway, so this agent says, well, do we need to do that? And I said, you do what you want. If you want to be Team Lisa or Lisa and Associates, or you want to use the big EXP logo, or if you want to use the Cobalt Group, that's fine. You do whatever you want. And
I agree, and that's what's really worked. And when we bought our franchises, you had to use colors and marks and the
Yep.
Remax logo and all of
Yep.
that, and you couldn't be anywhere else and do it a different way.
Right.
What we liked about EXP, not that we want to continue to plug them, but we're plugging them because we work for them. We found that
Self-serving,
that's
what we're doing.
This is the best model that we think.
Right.
And you can just sign on the building out here. You don't see EXP on, you see Whistle Beers.
Yeah.
And you can be that. And I think that's important to the agents because then their name is associated.
Brand
If they
themselves.
create a team, it's their team and they have the personal relationship with the client.
Yep.
And it's no longer, hey, I'm with Remax, you should list with me, or I'm with XYZ company. Even though those structures are still okay, they're just, I think they're going to eventually have to evolve away.
Times are changing.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'd get an argument or somebody would get really mad if I said it's going to have to go away. Old Dave Liniger, of course, he's kind of retired now, but they're going to have to make a change, I think, as all of them are.
Right. Well, and they are changing. Let's just face it. You look at where, forget about. I was going to say pre-COVID. It's not even pre-COVID. You just go back 2 years ago. Not even that. I mean, goodness gracious, you can go back, a year ago, 15 months ago. The landscaping has changed dramatically.
It's almost scary.
I do wonder though, if we would not have been so transactionally challenged over the last 2-3 years, coming out of those fairly decent transaction volume years during COVID, if we really would be in the same situation from a merger and acquisition standpoint, or is it almost just kind of like, hey, the model wasn't really working so great, but the model gets a heck of a lot more difficult when transaction volume is down 10, 20, 30, 40%. So kind of like that, how are we going to, we're going broke. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to make it up in volume. We're going to get bigger, get a more transaction footprints.
Yeah.
So
I think it was a natural evolution, and the housing market, real estate always has dips and valleys.
Yep.
That's just the way it is. And when we started coming out of that 2009 debacle, mentioned it earlier, they were scrambling. The big legacies, they had a big machine to operate, so they were issuing, Remax went public in 2013 or something like that, and they needed cash infusions. They needed to be able to pay off some debt because their philosophy was to more brick and mortar, and one of the goals was to go regionally owned offices. They were going to go back and buy them, and they did for corporate owned.
Right.
Well, you got to pay those loans, and can you do it with transactions? And you just said it. Transactions were down. Volumes were down.
It's tough. It is odd. I wonder, in a strange way, I used to be referred to by folks within the Coldwell Banker leadership or business consultants that would say, "Oh, Lance, you're a bad market broker." And what they would mean by that is I've had the most success when the market was the worst. Okay, and that was easy to. Well, why is that, Lance? Well, because I did a lot of foreclosure business, and and that's awesome if you happen to have the business. If you don't have the business in a foreclosure market, not very awesome. But hedge fund and stuff. So there'd be these windows at times where the market's really tough. I'm like, it is, but not for me. Because we're doing all this Fannie Freddie or hedge fund or whatever it happens to be. So that said, this market has been difficult for the last few years, and not that by the way, difficult, but I wasn't doing any foreclosures because there were none. I wasn't doing any hedge fund stuff. So this is a more difficult market that I haven't profited from. I've been just your average broker owner, your average agent, like everybody else, and wow, this is a tough market. So to that point, as much as I wish the market had been better over the last several years and will be better, in some ways I'm like, oh, if it had been, maybe it wouldn't have shook me to make the decision that I needed to make. Because if I was doing in a better market, everything's fine. I don't want to rock the boat. It's difficult to leave a legacy brand that I've been with for 25 years.
Plug you, because I don't think so. I think you would eventually seen it because you were seeing it.
I was 7 years ago.
You were seeing it, and it's you have to worry about not mixing up words. You were a good broker in a bad market,
Yeah.
rather than having someone tag you as a bad broker in the market.
Well, they said it was a bad market broker. I think did I say it was a bad broker in a market? I hope I didn't say that.
It's easy to get it confused.
At any rate, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to channel Howard Stern. We've done it all. We've said it all. It feels like this is a good place for us to wrap up episode 2.
I think we're having fun.
So we'll try to get a little
name.
We do.
Still need a name.
I don't
Make
know.
it appropriate this time, you guys.
I did post this, and I did get a bunch of suggestions. And to be honest with you, I probably need to go back and take a second look
I did
at
too.
those.
The number one was the knuckleheads, and I thought,
Knucklehead
we
works.
didn't want to do that.
Yeah, I think there was one I got, like Old Guys New School. I immediately dismissed that. What is Old Guys New School nonsense? But so I think in our episode, by the way, episode 3, we should plug episode 3. We're going to be in Paris, right? Yeah. So the EXP International, what do they call that? Is it EXP Con International? Well, at any rate, it's 2 weeks from today or tomorrow. So coincidentally, both of us are going.
Maybe we can do a show on real estate overseas
Yeah.
and wine and cheese.
There you go. And not that I'm rooting for the French soccer team, but maybe if things work out, if we might be in France, if France is still in the World Cup, maybe there'll be some fun stuff going on. So anyway, episode 3 will be shot from Paris, and then we'll try to get a little focused. Okay, we'll pick 2 or 3 topics and we'll stick to it and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll start. Yeah, we didn't want to ram it down everyone's throat to begin with. We wanted to let it go organically, but a lot of it's been an education. And I think agents, at least who I've talked to, they appreciate the education and the knowledge to start making decisions of what's going to happen, because there's a lot of confusion with all these acquisitions. So.
Well, there you go. Well, we will bring clarity in a world of confusion. We'll fix it. How's that? Maybe that'll be our title.
Yeah, clarity.
Okay, we should stop here. All right, guys. We'll see you. We'll see you at episode 3. All right.